Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions. Today I bring in Meghla. How you doing, Meghla?
Hey, I'm doing great, Danny. Thanks for having me.
Good. I mean, we met a few years ago. A lot of people will know you for your work through global sources. You've expanded upon that now, hence why you're on the show today. Do you want to give the audience a little bit of background on yourself?
Sure. So I've been in the sourcing industry for almost 19 years. I've worked in India and China. I lived in Shenzhen for about 9 years. And currently I'm based in Singapore. So I've been organizing the Global Sources Summit, which is an e-commerce conference for sellers like yourself. And you were a speaker at, I think, the very first conference that we did in April 2016. And you're coming to speak again at the conference in October. And more recently, I've launched a couple of my own initiatives. I've started my own company, and I'm planning to do a sourcing trip to India and a couple of other things for sellers in Asia.
Sounds good. So let's unpack that a little bit. So we're talking specifically here about Asia, but most, notably we're talking about is India. Now we've seen it all recently with the Trump tariffs. We've seen it where people are looking to maneuver their manufacturing to get around some of these problems that they're having. I think India and Pakistan are some of these places that people are talking about to avoid some of these issues with the taxation or the Trump tax, which I think is starting to look like there's some sense of communications now where this week, I think Trump's sitting down and they're trying to put their differences aside. But that aside, talk to me about the difference between the two, say, sourcing in China versus India.
Okay, so there are a couple of key differences. First of all, most of the product categories that are relevant for Amazon sellers, you'll find that the suppliers there are smaller and more the production is not as automated as it is in China. So, for example, in China, you'll find these huge factories with, large production machines, and they're churning out products in the millions. That's now not how things work in India. They're mostly small and mid-sized companies, and a lot of the products are actually handcrafted and they're handmade. So that's one of the key differences. And another difference I see is that in China, you can practically get anything and everything manufactured, starting from machines to jewelry to bags. But India specializes in certain product categories, and most of the products that India makes are made from natural materials. So whereas China is better for the man-made kind of materials, in India you'll find natural materials like cotton, jute. There's a lot of brass products coming out, genuine leather, wood. Those are the kinds of products that are more competitive in India. Another difference I see is the language. So most suppliers in India would speak English, and so communication is much smoother. There's less chance of misunderstandings. In China, of course, you'll find people with different levels of English, and it is okay to communicate with them, and buyers have been doing that, but it's just smoother when you communicate with an Indian supplier. I think that's another key difference. There's no language barrier as such.
Yeah, so if you don't mind me stepping in, this is why not everyone realizes, but within China that there's obviously a lot of the factories do not speak English, and there normally is like there's middle people that will work and operate on behalf of these factories. So because is it the second language in India is English anyway, so they're quite fluent in most cases, right? So
yes, it is.
You're going direct to factory basically without the middleman come into play.
That's correct. And it is the second language because there are about 22 plus official languages in India, and each language has a different script, and it's a totally different language. So Indians need English to communicate with each other. So right. For example, I'm from the north of India. When I go to south, then I don't understand their language, and so I communicate with them in English.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes total sense. So so basically what we're looking at here is more led by handmade products. Like you said, they don't have the same level of machinery, but then nowhere in the world can do what China does, where they can go and get 10, 15,000, workers and put them together and get production going. But what would you say is the advantages other than there's the communications in English, the reduction of middle people working in between the factory itself and obviously the person of private labeler. What other benefits are we looking at here?
One benefit I see is that there are very, unique designs that are coming out of India. So India has a lot of, styles that are very specific to the country. And in fact, each state has its own unique style in terms of, whether it's for fabrics or whether it's things like wood carving or metal products. So there's a very unique and specific style for these products, which you won't be able to find, from China or other countries because these styles are specific to India. And some of these products are very attractive and eye-catching, which I think is great for e-commerce because when a user is scrolling through Amazon search results, for example, and they see something that's very attractive and colorful, they will tend to stop. So I think that these products are thumb-stopping. And sometimes these products also command higher prices because they're handmade and they're they have a higher perceived value, so they can command higher prices and tend to be more profitable compared to similar products coming out from China.
What about another thing? Yeah, sorry, I'm butting in now. Apologies, it's because I just want to kind of get an understanding here because you mentioned the handmade thing. That what happens there with the consistency and the scalability? So if they're handmade, there's going to be slight differences because they're not made from a mold and stuff. How does all that work?
Yeah, so for handmade products, that is definitely I wouldn't say concern, but I think buyers who buy such products, they understand that, each product is handmade and there might be certain inconsistencies. However, there are quality control companies, inspection companies in India, similar to the types of companies there are in China. And you can always get a pre-shipment inspection done to ensure that the consistency is, it doesn't vary too much from the sample that you've given to the supplier. And so yeah, I think people who buy such products, they have that kind of expectation. And in fact, I've seen this on Amazon listings, like some of the listings actually specifically mention this, because these products are handmade, you can expect to have some sort of, variation from the picture that's actually posted on the listing.
Yeah, because Amazon obviously caters for handmade as well within reason, don't they? And then obviously you've got places like Etsy and other marketplaces that they can be sold on. But like you said, it's very, very specific. So switching gears slightly, if someone wanted to move their manufacturing, but they were doing spatulas, etc., would India be a good place still to go?
So I think it totally depends on the product category. So the first thing that you need to do is decide, which product category you want to move, and then find suppliers in India, and then do a detailed comparison of the product cost and logistics and all of those things, and see if the product is more competitive in India. I'm seeing a lot of people moving some of the production of their wooden products and genuine leather products to India, because of the tariffs. And they're finding that the products are higher quality. They're, much, much better. The prices are more competitive, and especially given the Trump tariffs and all. So I think that's the first thing to do. Find out if there are suppliers for that product in India, and then decide if you want to shift some products to India.
Yeah. So what would you advise for people? Because, selling on Amazon today is about differentiation, right? So it's good going down this route, handmade products, etc. What kind of things, what trends are you seeing? Obviously not specific products, so people rush out and go and, select those, and it ends up being trash in that market because it becomes over competitive. But you mentioned earlier on about leather and wooden products. Is clothing another category that they do well with in terms of India?
Yes, clothing is another category that's very competitive, and specifically cotton, silk, wool, all of the natural kind of materials, those are very competitive. There's knitted fabrics and garments, as well as woven. So for apparel specifically, and the knitted kind of fabrics, T-shirts and all, there are large factories that are based in the south of China. So there's a city in the south of India called Chennai, where there are a lot of garment manufacturers, and there are some very large scale production facilities over there as well.
Cool. And is India laid out in the same way as China, where they've got different provinces and stuff where they specialize?
Yes, absolutely. there are different provinces. So like I said, apparel manufacturing, a lot of it is done in south of India. And then there is one center or one city in the north called Muradabad, which specializes in metal products. So you'll find like brass, iron, all of those kind of metal home decor specifically. And then there's another city that specializes in wooden products. That's also in the north of India. It's called Saharanpur. Another one specializes in ceramic. So they usually specialize in certain types of materials because that's the material that's available, in and around the city or in the state.
Yeah. So how would it work in terms of, you mentioned, we'll discuss that towards the end of the show. You talk about sourcing. How does it differentiate the sourcing in China compared to India? I mean, is it the same protocol? People are going to go over, they meet the manufacturers. Let's talk about trade shows. Do you want to give me a bit of background there, or what goes on out there and the trends and stuff?
Sure. So why don't we first talk about how to find suppliers in India and how that's different from when you would find suppliers in China.
Yeah.
So, the two websites that you use to find suppliers in China, Global Sources and Alibaba, you'd start there. Those are the two websites that also have suppliers from India. So you would do a product search on those websites and then filter by supplier location. And that would give you all of the, India suppliers. And in fact, Alibaba does have quite a few India suppliers and even Global Sources. So that's where you would start.
Yeah.
Another website to consider is India Mart. And that is the local. So that's the local version of Global Sources or Alibaba. And but the problem with India Mart is that it has a lot of suppliers that focus on the domestic market as well. So you've got to be very cautious when you use India Mart and make sure that you're doing your due diligence to ensure that the supplier has export experience. Whereas the suppliers on Global Sources and Alibaba are more export focused. So they would understand the requirements and the certifications and the standards of your importing country. Whereas not the same for India Mart. So you've got to be a bit more cautious and do a bit more, work when you're sourcing from India Mart. But they have more suppliers than Alibaba and Global Sources, of course, because most of the suppliers there are from India. So that's one. Another thing that you could do is in India, most of the product categories have export promotion councils. So these are government organizations that have been tasked to increase exports in their specific industry. So you can just search for, your product name, let's say wooden products or leather or textiles or handicrafts or gifts, and then search for the relevant export promotion council, send them an email, and usually they have lists of suppliers that are part of their directory or, that are members of that council. And they're usually very willing to help overseas importers. But they might be slow to reply because it's a government organizations and they have
red tape and stuff. Yeah,
they take time to do stuff. But that's another thing to consider. And then talking about trade shows, there are a couple of major trade shows that are held in India that people can consider visiting. And one of the most important shows is called the Indian Handicrafts and Gifts Fair. That's held in Delhi twice a year. And it's an export-focused fair. So all of the exhibitors at the fair are 100% export-focused, or they export the majority of their products. And the fair is not open to local buyers, or to local consumers. It's only for foreign buyers, or locals are admitted if they represent maybe a buying company or an importer. So I think that is a really good fair to start with. And then there are other fairs that are more product specific. For example, currently there's a homeware fair that's going on in Mumbai. However, most of the suppliers exhibiting there, they also cater to the domestic market. So there are some buyers that visit that fair, but then, the exhibitors are kind of a mix of suppliers doing exports and domestic. Similarly, there are other fairs for leather, jewelry, home products, but most of them are smaller. So this is Indian Handicrafts and Gifts Fair that's held in Delhi, is the biggest export fair that sellers can consider attending.
Sounds good. So culturally, the difference between, say, China and India in terms of negotiation, is there anything that stands out for you?
I think culturally they're very similar.
Yeah.
I don't know, being in Asia and all of the history. So one of the things that I found similar is that relationships are really important. It's important to build a good relationship with your supplier, just as as it is in China. And once you've built trust and relationship with your supplier, you'll tend to get better terms, better pricing. They're more responsive to your emails. They might prioritize your orders if they have a large number of orders. So I found that relationships are really important in India as they are in China. That's one thing. And then another thing I found is that similar to Chinese suppliers, Indian suppliers don't say no directly. So if you make a request to them, they'll say, "Oh yes, we can do that. Why not?" And then they'll try to figure out a way.
Find a way, yeah.
Find a way to do it. And mostly they'll maybe subcontract to another factory or get find another factory that manufactures the product that you want or anything like that. Yeah.
Sounds good. So let's talk about the trip. You're putting together a trip to take people out there. What should they expect?
Okay, so this trip is going to be held in October, and it's a 7-day trip that's organized around the Indian Handicrafts and Gifts Fair that's in Delhi. And it's a learning plus sourcing plus cultural trip. So we're going to be spending about 3 days at the fair, where we're going to be guiding people on how to talk to suppliers and how to gather information. And at the same time, we're going to do a conference, a 1-day conference, where people from India and overseas, they're going to be talking and giving presentations about various aspects related to sourcing from India. So I've got sourcing agents that have got a lot of experience working in India, who are going to be talking about things like how to find and vet suppliers, how to negotiate with suppliers, what are the product categories that are most competitive from India. And there's one manufacturer who's in fact coming from the south of India, and he's going to be giving an overview of the apparel manufacturing industry in the south. So we've got 1 full day of conferences. Then we attend the trade shows. And then on the days that we attend the trade shows, we come back to the hotel and then we have more presentations. So we have about 2 or 3 presentations after the shows. And then we go out for dinner and networking. And on one of the days, we'll also visit a factory, because I think it's just so important for people to actually go visit a factory and see how products are manufactured. So we'll do a factory tour. And we're also going to be doing a cultural program for all attendees. So basically, we've booked this ballroom in a hotel, and we're going to have this dance troupe that's coming to perform exclusively for the group. And we're also going to be taking the group to Agra, which is where the Taj Mahal is. So that's one of the 7 wonders of the world. And it's a day trip. We'll leave early in the morning and be back by late evening. So, yeah, the idea of this trip is to, first of all, take people to the fair so that they can meet suppliers and source products, but also to provide a lot of content so that they can, they have the knowledge and information and tools and connections to source any product from India. Yep. So the products at the fair are, limited in terms of, handicrafts and gift products and apparel and fashion accessories or so. But there are a lot of products outside the fair that can also be sourced from India. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's...
Makes sense. And you've got Global Sources coming up in October, right?
Yes, exactly. So I'm really excited about that too, and very excited to be meeting you again. So we've got Global Sources Summit coming up in October. It's from October 27th to the 29th, mm-hmm. and it's co-located with the Global Sources fashion and lifestyle trade shows. Yep. So for people who don't know Global Sources Summit, this is a 3-day conference that's mostly for experienced and advanced e-commerce and Amazon sellers. And we've got about 22 speakers from around the world and China as well coming to the conference.
Sounds good. So what's the best way that people can reach you?
So people can reach me on Facebook. Just search for me by name and send me a message on Facebook. Do
you want to give everyone your surname? Because I always mess it up. So I'll let you pronounce it and spell it. Yeah, I'll have it in the show notes, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so my name is Meghla Bhardwaj, and then my last name is pronounced Bhardwaj. But if you search for Meghla, you should be able to find me. I don't think there are too many people by my name. It's a unique name in itself.
Sounds good. Guys, thanks for joining us. Meghla, thanks for joining us. If this is your first time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you again in the next few days. Take care.